My name's Steve Hewlett. I write a column in The Guardian and then a show on Radio 4. And since neither of those things pay anything like a living wage, I'll do absolutely anything else you have ever a mind to ask me to. So that's me. We have a really interesting panel here to discuss these things, and I've got a suggestion for how we go about it. But just to introduce people, Douglas McCabe is digital media analyst at Enders Analysis. Next to him, Ewan MacLeod. He's founder and editor of Mobile Industry Review and an entrepreneur. If that doesn't sound like it's quite on the money, I can assure you that when he starts to explain what he does, you'll see why. Gurtej Sandhu is digital director of The Times, who, as you know, are about to go behind the paywall. And next to me here, Mary Beth Christie is head of product management at ft.com. I'm going to start off just by asking, going around here and seeing what people, just to get some sense of what people do and what they're up to, so that we can all get to the sort of same place. So, Mary Beth, if we can start with you. The FT already do paid for content. It's already behind a paywall of sorts. Can you just explain to us in layman's terms sort of what you do, how it works, and whether it works?
Yes. As probably most of you are aware, the FT actually started charging for its content probably 8 years ago now. And they had a hard paywall. In 2007...
What do you mean a hard paywall?
The editorial staff decided what was going to be charged for and what wasn't.
Okay, so some is free.
So some was free, some wasn't, and there was, from a user point of view, you had no idea. One day that kind of content would be free, another day it would be charged for.
That's still my experience.
Okay, it's going to be, I'll tell you
It's
why.
right though, isn't it? That's still what happens to me, isn't it? Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't.
Yeah, it depends on where, it depends on whether you're a subscriber or a registered user. So I will explain that to you now.
Please do.
So what we realized was this was quite confusing for our users, and it was very confusing for even the newsroom, and it was very difficult to tell what was effective and what wasn't. So in 2007, we put in what we call the frequency model. The New York Times has called it the metered model, but it gives anonymous users X number of articles for free. Then you're prompted to register for free again. We just ask you for a password and a couple demographic questions. And then you can see up to 10 articles until then you're prompted to subscribe. And then you can choose, there's 2 subscription levels, premium and standard subscription. All of the 10 articles is over a 30-day period. So if you're a registered user and you're not a subscriber, you'll be able to see 10 articles always in a month's period for free, and then the clock is reset every 30 days. The advantages of this for us was we realized that we don't know what users find valuable. It's, some users might find our political coverage more valuable than our economic coverage. So this meant that those who find our coverage the most valuable, regardless of what they're looking at, our most engaged users, are the ones we charge, and they don't mind paying because they are engaged, because they like us, because the FT brand is important to them and our coverage is great. And it has worked beautifully from a, it has not hurt our ad revenues, quite the opposite. What's happened is because we have so many registered users now, we now know more data about our users. We pass that on and help us target our advertising better. So advertising has improved, as has our base of known users. So for us, this metered model has worked extremely well.
So roughly, if it's in person or you don't know the answer, don't worry about it. But roughly what proportion of FT revenues now come from subscription?
I don't know if we could say that, but I could tell you that.
But we sort of is it sort of 25%, 50%, less than 25%?
It's. I don't know if I can say that. I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure I can't. I can tell you that we have 126,000 paying subscribers.
Okay, that's another question then. Of the 126,000 paying subscribers, how many are there because they're part of a corporate subscription?
Less than half.
But nearly half.
I'm not going to say it. No.
Well, it's quite a lot.
I can't pick out of the number, but you're really good. You are good.
Yeah. No, I'm absolutely crap because you haven't told us anything. Okay. So, okay, but all right, but it's fair to say, isn't it, that corporate subscription is an important part of the mix here.
Yes, yes.
And that probably is at least partially explained, or by the kind of information that you have.
Yes.
So corporates, big financial companies, if they can get what your journalists are finding out 5 minutes ahead of anybody else, that's market making for them. There's a reason why they pay to have that information, and they're probably paying. They may also be paying, other financial news services, financial wires, and whatever. They're the sort of companies that do that sort of thing.
Right.
So I suppose here's another question. Then, have you any idea, what portion of your subscribers are, if you like, sort of general news subscribers, or you can't really distinguish it like that? I mean, are most of them in the financial business?
Most of them are not in the financial business. I don't think that's true. I don't think most of them are in the financial business if you're talking about the majority.
Okay. Well, just one other question then, before we move on. What plans do you have to develop this now?
Well, what our philosophy is we're platform agnostic. So we've put the same model on our iPhone, on our iPad application, on our mobile application, on any device basically where you can see our content. Because what we charge for is our content, not the way you get it. And that's what's important.
So you're talking 100,000 or several 100,000 subscribers altogether?
Subscribers, we have 126,000.
That's global?
That's global, yeah.
Because that's significantly greater than your UK circulation, isn't it?
I wouldn't even. Because I work on the .com site, I don't know. I thought our circulation is 400,000.
Oh no, that's no. It's less than
globally, yes.
But
the UK is less than 150,000, isn't it? No, might have it, yeah.
You probably know better than I do because I.
Global is 390,000 at the moment.
Right. Okay.
Down from 425,000 5 years ago. So you're suffering in that sense, but UK I think is less than 100,000. I think. Okay. All right. Okay. Hold that thought. Gurtej, the Times is about to go behind its paywall. Yes. Again, for the uninitiated, and that's all of us, I think. What exactly are you planning to do, and how's it going to work?
So effectively, the whole paper actually goes behind the paywall, both for the Times and the Sunday Times as well. It's two different sites at the moment. We have one site. The payment terms are quite simple for us, which is you pay £2 if you want subscription for a week. You pay £1 for a daily sort of pass, effectively. We're in a slightly different place. I mean, one is, I think, one of the questions you were leading to. We are a general newspaper. We're one of the first. Well, we're certainly one of the first in terms of doing the general newspaper piece. Secondly, for us, the sort of second challenge to this is, we're at the beginning. We're not in 1992, 93, where the FT started, or the Wall Street Journal started, and various bits and pieces. So we have to mature our audience. We have to mature that process. So we've kept it relatively quite simple within that as well.
The New York Times went to pay and then came out again. Yes. What do you take from that experience?
I think the New York Times blinked when they shouldn't have done. I think part of,
you mean they should have stuck with it?
Yeah, it was 250,000 people. It's not an insignificant amount. It wasn't. They did. Certainly when we look at the numbers in circulation, they didn't really fail. What happened was that the ad market boomed. And suddenly they felt that actually the revenue you could generate from the ad market would be far more substantial, and they blinked. And I think now they probably look at, certainly now that in January they're going to go behind the paywall, I think now that they would probably look at that as something that maybe they shouldn't have done.
So if I pay my £1 or my £2, whatever it is, will I be able to, is it device agnostic? Can I go and get it anywhere?
We're working towards that. That's not fully.
In theory, though. Yeah. That's the objective.
As we sort of go forward, I'll be honest, Steve, I think as we go forward, we're going to learn. We're not in a position where to a certain extent we have that information, that data, and various bits and pieces. I know, for example, the Guardian app has been downloaded as one of the most successful in terms of the
iPhone app, yeah.
But it's cost them readership on the edition, and you pay for it once. So we have to work out the models. We have to work out whether you manage that in subscription or you manage that in downloads as well. So
you have to explain what you mean by that.
So. The sense is from internally to the Guardian that what has happened is people have now downloaded the Guardian app, which you do a one singular payment for, are now not buying the newspaper edition, and it's not an insignificant number.
Right.
And there's no subscription model they're putting.
Right. So what they should have done is either not charge the download, but charge for not charge for the application, but charge for every download.
I wouldn't want to advise them because the Times pays me instead. But I would suggest that would possibly have been the better business model.
Yeah, well, you never know. It's funny old businesses, isn't it? You never know who you'll be working for next week.
I've been at news since '96 on and off. So.
Okay, so are there plans to bundle up the subscription or a Times a newspaper subscription with other things like?
I think it's fair to say, Steve.
Will I get an option with my Sky package, for example?
I think let's split the two, because there's one which is the Times on multiple different platforms.
Yes.
There's an absolute sort of movement in terms of working out what that final model is. The intention would be that you buy a subscription and you get access in various places. We'll move through that process. It's going to take us a degree of time to move through the platforms and the technology stuff. The question in relation to Sky, I think, is a slightly different thing, obviously.
Okay. Well, but in any event, if I take out a subscription to the newspaper,
yes,
I'll get the online access with it, won't I?
If you take a subscription directly.
So in other words, if I'm a Times newspaper subscriber, so I instead of buying a copy every day, I pay for the 7-day. I pay £6 or £7, whatever it is, for the 7-day supply to my news agent. I give the tokens to my news agent.
Yes.
If I'm that sort of subscriber, I'm going to get access to the website, aren't I?
The challenge is with the tokens, we have no way of connecting the two.
Okay.
So the challenge for us, we would.
But leave aside the nuts and bolts of it. But the intention is, if I'm a subscriber, if I'm prepared to take out a subscription to the paper, I get the online access.
I'm going to be honest with you, Steve. A little bit like yourself. There's some detail in that I can't release at the moment. It will be there on Monday. Monday and Tuesday we'll do the announcement.
Okay. Well, let's just assume for a moment that if, for argument's sake, there is a point in this, which is that so the point about the subscription is it's cheaper than paying the cover price every day. Right?
There's no trucks, there's no distribution.
But it is cheaper than buying. There's an obvious reason for doing it, which is that you get me 7 days a week. You might otherwise only get me 2 days a week if I happen to go to the station. So I see the point of it, and it's a perfectly standard and normal marketing practice. You're currently losing, I think, 70-80 million pounds a year. You've got an editorial budget, according to John Withrow last night, of something around 100 million. You're losing 70. Now, even if you took your entire readership and converted them to your pay model, you're still probably 30 million adrift.
Some interesting numbers.
I'm guessing.
But I think, Steve, the real key to this is we're about to start a journey. It's a starting point. Let's be honest about this. Will it matter in the long run whether somebody buys a digital subscription or the newspaper edition or X, Y, Z? It's readership for us. And so I think one thing from our perspective, certainly from News International, is there is a change. We're in a position where, from an industry perspective, whether it's the announcements from the Times last week or whether it's the announcements from, the Guardian shifting 100 journalists' jobs as well, we're in a position we have to do something. We have to do something for change. So I think while we can talk about the actual numbers at the current state, it's the principle of where we are and it's the journey we want to take.
Okay.
Which hopefully, would hopefully meet that challenge.
The other, perhaps we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute, but the other thing is, of course, that you already have, John Withrow last night was quite happy to acknowledge that he was that 90%, that when you go behind a paywall, he was asked how many of your current visitors, if you like, whatever you call them, you're likely to lose. And when the figure of 90% was mentioned, he said at least. Yes. So in terms of your existing online revenues, this is going to be very significantly. Your advertising revenue online is going to disappear, isn't it?
To be honest, I would absolutely echo. We have, not just in terms of the online edition, in terms of going behind the paywall, but also in terms of what we're doing on the iPad and the various sort of bits and pieces. I'd absolutely echo the sentiment that's just come across now in terms of advertisers and advertiser engagement. There's fundamentally, higher yields, higher revenue pieces. We see that there's, in the initial sense, obviously we're going to have a sense of a reduction. But we don't see that as a permanent position. We believe we'll generate more additional revenue out of advertising as we go through.
But in the short term, you're trading in probably 10-15 million unique users for 100,000 max subscribers.
I can't comment about the number because that would be fair. We're trading in what we have today to try and build a model for the future. And
you're confident it's going to work?
yes.
Okay. We'll come back to this, I'm sure. Well, I mean, we will. Ewan, just tell us, if you can, your experience of attempting to function in the paid-for world.
So it was a real attempt. So I'm ultra new media. That is effectively a blogger, although I like to try and call myself a blogger analyst, just because I don't just do it in underpants anymore. I focus on the mobile industry. I built the site up across 4 years. A rough audience every month of 250,000, rough. It depends on what I'm writing and who's linking to me. Sometimes it can be 1 million if you get a good story.
And this is what you might call high quality, specialised information aimed at
That's right.
an audience of people in a business who need
mobile
this
industry
stuff.
executives,
Okay.
people that work in the industry and surround it, but a very focused site. And I was paying for it. I was paying for it because I really believed in it, and I still believe in it. I wanted to do it, and it was very cathartic for me as an entrepreneur to finally be able to shed the light and do what I felt was a better job than the mainstream media, the mainstream telecoms media was doing. So that was great. And then a company came along and said, we really like what you're doing. We love what you're doing, actually. Can we buy the company? And can we buy the site? I said, sure, yeah, let's talk, no problem. They said, no, listen, the first thing you're going to have to do is, you have to turn subscription only. And I go, brilliant, fantastic. For 2 reasons. A, because this is quite interesting to see, but I really wanted to understand what would happen if I took this property. This is mine, I could do what I want with it. And made it pay only. Now, the acquiring party said, it's $1,000 a year, okay? So we're buying it for us. We are buying your service, what you're doing right now. Could you focus on mobile payments? But we want it straight into our intranet for our employees, okay? Everything else, anyone else can have it, but it's $1,000 a year, okay? 100 quid a month, not a lot of money, okay? So I say, yep, no problem. I'm looking at big figures, and this is sounding good to me and to my wife, because I've been spending the money, right? Okay, 20 to 30,000 a month in costs for me to produce it. Team of people, really exciting, trips all over the place. Now, the moment I announced that this is now, so you got 30 days notice, just to let you know. Terribly sorry, everybody, and there's a lot of loyal readers on the site. I said, I'm sorry, it's £1,000 a year if you want it. And that's just the deal. It's a commercial deal. Yeah, kind regards, Ewan. And I put a whole big explanation. And I was outraged. Remember, it's my site, and I've been paying, let's just say, 200 grand, right? I've paid for everyone to read my site over the last couple of years. And I'm expecting the vast majority of the readers to understand. I don't want everyone to pay, and I know $1,000's a lot of money for a person, but for a company, nothing, right? We all know it's nothing. How many subscribers did I get? How many people phoned up and said, Ewan, now remember that I'm getting daily updates from the PR, hundreds of PRs, hundreds of executives emailing me, and Ewan, please write about this, right? Okay, imagine me as a wannabe, slightly poster boy in this small microcosm, right? Okay, so what I mean about it is people are talking to me daily, right? I have a small but meaningful profile. Okay, because this is much better, I thought, than the Times, right? Because I know, what I mean by that is
More like the Financial Times.
So what I mean is,
whatever that is.
You've got lots of different types. I know this is the industry, right? They know me. They see me at events. They've come along to my events, right? I've shaken their hand and I've paid for their drinks. Let's be clear. I've paid the £5,000 every time I do an event. I pay, right? So when all these SMEs.
So go on. How many was it?
No.
Is that no?
Absolutely zero.
Not one.
Not one. No. There was a Facebook movement.
Did you start it?
No. Chap called Mike. Thank you, Mike. Chap called Mike said, listen, let's campaign for £10 a month, right? 12 people join the group. So there we go.
So, have you given up on this idea now?
Right, now the acquiring company, if they could have told me this at the beginning, it would be rather useful, went, all right, no, but we don't need your .com. We actually just want this kind of subscription service, so you carry on what you're doing with that. So I continue to provide this service. Mobile Interest Review is there, and it's fine. Not on a service level anyway. It doesn't cost me 30 grand a month now.
Right.
I just do it, if you like, myself, with a little bit of sponsorship.
So, again, briefly if you can, in terms of what the Times and the others are contemplating, what's your instinct?
I love the concept. I just don't necessarily think it's going to deliver.
Okay. Douglas, from a broader, sort of from a more of an overview perspective, if you like, how serious are the problems that the press faces, and to what extent do you think these attempts, that attempts to kind of go pay, are going to succeed?
Well, I'll take the first part of that first. How serious are the problems? We have just been through the worst recession in living memory, or whatever we describe it as, with newspapers losing 25% of advertising revenue, circulation continuing to fall, etc., etc. Times losing, what is it, £80 million last year, Guardian's 50, 60 million pounds last year. So it's an industry that it's not a traditional commercial industry in the way that many sectors are. It's an industry run by often entrepreneurs or proprietors who run businesses for particular reasons and so on. So it's always been an industry with curious metrics, in other words, but it is now.
You mean it's always been loss-making, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not always been loss-making. I mean, there are profitable businesses out there, of course. The Sun is a very good example, but there's the Daily Mail, there are several, and there are lots in the local space and so on as well. But margins have clearly collapsed. So even those businesses with anything even resembling a kind of profit, it's now down at kind of very, very kind of small numbers. And a lot of those businesses assumed that what would happen post-recession is that there would be a kind of bounce back. What would happen is advertising would start to flow back in, readers would
as it is in TV.
As it has done in TV, exactly. ITV's advertising has been up sort of 10% and things, figures like that. And what's happened in press has been much more patchy, and local press has continued to decline. So not only has it not come back, it hasn't even stabilized. The best that the kind of publishers can generally say is that the pace of decline has slowed, whatever that means. But and for national press, there's a bit of stabilization.
So do you think that in addition to the recessionary factors, that there are structural factors at work here which are making this altogether more serious?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big issue, ultimately, when you look at this from various sort of different angles, you look at it from the advertising angle, you look at it from the consumption of print angle, the consumer angle, as it were. Whatever way you look at it, you sort of come back to the same fundamental challenge, which is about the scale of the newspaper industry. I mean, we're very lucky in the UK. We have an astonishing number of newspapers and an astonishing number of very, very good newspapers. We have 10 national papers, 1,200 local papers. I mean, it's amazing that we have this ability to kind of generate all this content. And indeed, there's an amazing amount of consumption. 10 million people pay for a newspaper every day in this country, despite the fact Metro is handed to you for free. Still 10 million people buy a newspaper. In many ways, we actually kind of underrate that sheer scale. But the decline of that scale has been going on for 20 years and has been accelerating from the moment, really, that Google had traction. So really from around 2001, that decline started to accelerate. During that period, advertising continued to rise. And I think what you're now experiencing is a fundamental lag effect, that advertising has finally woke up to the fact that maybe there is a kind of real kind of fundamental decline taking place here. And I think that's ultimately the big challenge for the newspaper industry, is one of scale.
So strategically, what are their options?
Well, what they have done for the last 18 months.
Does it break down neatly into a free option, maximise availability, etc., advertiser funded, versus a pay option with, in other words, sort of a much, perhaps in the former case, a much lighter relationship with millions and millions and millions of people. The Guardian would say 38 million worldwide, for example, as opposed to a much richer, direct, more commercial relationship with a much smaller number than that.
Well, I mean, there's a fundamental question about whether you think a general news site will really get that kind of, will get those kind of volumes. I think the kind of interesting question is, what does the ecosystem really ultimately kind of look like? And surely it is going to be a kind of combination of professional news provision on one side and a lot more fragmented kind of services, a combination of blogs and all sorts of different types of content provision on the other side. And newspapers need to survive in that ecosystem. And it may be that they have to adapt to such a degree that they are part of both sides of it, and that newsrooms may need to shrink. It's a kind of it's the kind of thing that no one kind of really wants to talk about. But how many newsrooms of 500 news reporters are there going to be in 10 years' time or 15 years' time? I think that's a serious question and a serious challenge.
So, so to what extent at the Times then is this sort of about trying to protect the newspaper? I mean, the print, the physical article.
I mean, while there's a whole sort of line in terms of the protection piece, also there's a whole change in terms of the distribution models as well. We are seeing the devices, we are seeing the iPhones and the iPads and the various bits are coming in, all those type of devices. I think for us, the concept about it's journalism, and it's journalism wherever we can distribute it, and effectively under the Times brand, is really where we're looking at. So if it's a connect to the physical newsprint paper and the implications of that industry, that component of the industry, that's slightly different from the expansion that we believe will be there in distribution and in payment mechanics and in an economy around that as well.
One other factor about the news, about the New York Times decision to, as you say, blink was that their columnists were in open revolt, because when the columnist disappeared behind a paywall, it kind of defeats the point. People write because they want to have, they may be massively self-aggrandizing and egomaniacs, but they want to feel as if they're, at the very least, they're part of the conversation. Now, you're about to take all your columnists, Danny Finkelstein, Aronovich, you name them, and some outstanding, personally, I think they're some of the best in Fleet Street, or for want of a better way of putting it. I know no one's there anymore, you know what I mean? But they are some of the best. Now, you're going to take them out of the swim.
I think there's two things to that, Steve. I think, one is the number of journalism, and there's enough journalists here as well who sort of sit in an organisation saying, you're giving our content away for free. So from a principal perspective, there's enough people within virtually all of the newspapers who say, we produce this thing, and on the website, you give it away for free. I think the second part of it, which I think is also quite important, is, we just announced a voluntary redundancy programme. The Guardian lost 100 journalists just before Christmas. The Telegraph have gone through the various bits and pieces as well. You're actually seeing the shrinking of journalism. So actually, that voice in itself within the newspaper industry is becoming smaller, just on the sheer scale of the individuals that are not going to be involved.
Well, you say the columnists aren't complaining because you're sacking them.
No, we're not sacking anybody.
No, sorry. No, sorry.
No, but the point I'm making to this is the fact that actually, this concept of the fact that they're not going to be heard. There's enough mechanics for people to be heard. I mean, we talked about Twitter, we talked about various other bits and pieces and people linking back in.
Yeah.
So it's a platform, actually, as we see it, with extended distribution.
Well, sort of, except that take Twitter, for example. One of the glories of Twitter, and I'm a new convert, so I feel like someone's just given up smoking, But so forgive me if I'm rather over-enthusiastic about it. But the thing I have really, apart from comedians who are very good in 140 characters and do make you laugh, that the best thing about it is it's opened my. I've been introduced to material I would never have found otherwise, or I might have done, but it was very unlikely. So the compressed URLs that send around papers, articles, stuff all over the world. I'm seeing people are referring to, and it's opened my eyes to things I'd never have found. Really, really, genuinely interesting things. Now, the thing is, so I find a tweet about David Aronovich has written something, or Danny Finkelstein, really interesting in the Times today. Oh, that's jolly interesting. Ding, ding. Whoops, £2. Now, that's not going to work, is it? You're cutting yourself off from the conversation.
I'm not entirely sure the Times will ever cut itself off from the conversations, because alongside various other bits and pieces, we still have the newspaper form within that as well.
Yeah, but surely the point is this, isn't it? I mean, the nature of the conversation has changed. It is changing. It's no longer a press review on a TV show that
Can
holds
I
up a...
respond?
Yeah, of course, please do.
Okay,
Yeah.
one thing I find interesting is your starting assumption is that these guys think that they're getting cut off, where in our newsroom anyway, everybody thinks that what they write is worth paying for. There isn't anyone on the newsroom floor who doesn't believe with full confidence that they are worth paying for. So there has never been a discussion.
And I think if you scratch the surface,
I don't know a columnist who doesn't think they're worth paying for.
Right. So,
no, that's
you
true.
know, they come in and they say, if you want to see me,
but
pay.
they're doing it to be in the conversation.
No, but I mean, just following on that, I think if you scratch the surface of virtually lots of this type of stuff and actually have the conversations today, not when the New York Times did this about 2-3 years ago, with all the structural issues that we have, with all the issues associated with where this industry is, I think that challenge about columnists and having that voice and stuff actually is not that significant an issue.
I don't know if I hope you're right or not. I'm not sure that you are right though, because I mean I think first of all that columnists, writers want to be in the conversation, and in the end, owners want to be in the conversation. I mean, it might make commercial sense to go behind a paywall, but it takes you out of the conversation.
Steve, the point I'm making is we don't believe we will be out of the conversation. We don't believe that we will be because we actually have multiple different positions. We have, we do intend to be on virtually every platform going. There are elements where people have to pay.
But behind a paywall.
For a relatively fair price.
No, I'm not disputing whether it's a fair price or not. I'm just saying it's behind a paywall.
I don't think we can get away from that. But in front of the paywall at the moment.
I mean, look, here's another one. Here's another one. This came up last night with John Witherow.
No, but just that point. In front of the paywall, without a paywall, is what we have. Let's be honest. I mean, and there's only a decline in that piece. So I'm sure there's enough columnists who will be happily earning more because their subscription's happening than giving you away for free, having share of voice, and actually there's a reduction in the amount you actually pay them. So I mean, let's face facts. We are in an industry that has those problems. We have to do something, and if that is some levels of sensitivities about columnists or various other bits and pieces as well, we're going to have to manage it. We have no choice.
Well, I'm very much worth paying for.
I would pay for you as well.
Well, you're very good. See, that's a key point, right? I'm worth paying for. Okay, that's not what I think. It's what my wife thinks and my mum thinks. Okay, they don't pay, and unfortunately nobody else does. So as a columnist in the mobile industry and a reasonably influential on a good day columnist, nobody. And what's actually more important to me is the ability to be able to influence the conversation. So, for example, a company will come to me and say, "Listen, we don't want to talk about voicemail. Could we sponsor a voicemail series?" I go, "Yeah, okay, all right." And then I'll use my that's a commercial viewpoint that's working for me. But I need Twitter. I get 20 to 30% of my traffic now from Twitter, and I need to be open. I wonder how your columnists are going to react. I mean, I think I get the Financial Times viewpoint. I get that. I'm concerned about the general news. I'm concerned about David Aronovich and or Jeremy Clarkson's the one that I'll pop in for. And unfortunately, I feel that Jeremy is almost worth it. And so I mean, if it's free, I'll go, yeah, cool. But if I get the first 10 lines or first 3 lines, and it says pay, unless you haven't got me through Sky or someone else, I don't think I'm.
And just on that point, it's a good problem to have. If the problem for a newspaper is that it has to have fantastic content that entices people in, it's a great problem for us to have. Let's have that problem. Let's not have institutional issues.
It's got to be really good, though, isn't it? It's got to be amazing.
We are great.
Why not?
We will be better. I mean, if we can't have confidence in what we produce, and we can't have, I mean, would I pay for you? Probably. But the point is, nice. But you are influential. There is an element associated with that. Well, that's actually the issue we have. We have to create multiple dimensions of content. We have to create multiple distribution within that, and actually we just have to be good.
Do you not think that and I mean the FT in some respects, comment at the FT is a very high quality, but it's of less significance. In my take, it's not what the paper's for.
Well, it depends who you're talking to.
Well, no. I know Philip Stevens, I'm sure, thinks it is what the paper's for, and he's a very good columnist. But it's not. It doesn't. The FT is not there. Is not in the business of influencing in the same way that the Times would see itself naturally and quite properly as part of, if you like, as I want to keep calling the conversation. The Times is part of it and wants to be part of it, That's why Rupert Murdoch owns it. That's why, you know, and it's the Guardian for its own reasons wants to be part of the conversation. You know, home of liberal journalism. So the Sun for its own reasons wants to be part of the conversation. That's what they think. That's part of our national life. I'm struggling slightly with how you do that behind a paywall when the numbers are low. Now it may be that in the longer term, if everyone gets used to it and the numbers grow, then that's where the conversation will be, and we'll all have got used to it. But is it a question of habit?
Well, I have one question back to you on that one, which is before the internet, were they not part of the conversation when you had to pay for the newspaper?
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say.
I mean, people had to pay for newspapers, and I don't understand why, other than a bit of an aberration for the last 20 years, why that can't be. Well,
here's what the argument might be, which is to say, I mean, it's often characterised as, you know, the idea that the internet is free has been somehow sort of morally aberrant, if you know what I mean. So in other words, it's perfectly proper to charge people to pay proper money for good content. That's true, and you know, but it's not so much about moral aberrance. It's not so much that the habit is free. It's that it's transparent and it's open and it's quick. Yeah. It's a way of being that's occurred here. It's not that, I mean, people who take things free on the internet pay for everything else in their life. It's not like they're not all criminals.
No,
it's not, if you know what I mean. Sort of, we are. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's about whether you're in sync, I suppose, with the way that the world is going, and I guess.
But if the world is going to a position where, you know, there's a real issue about how much you invest in journalism. If the world is going to a position where effectively you're getting into a route of commoditization because everything is free, and in that sense, we all know how we treat things that are free versus things that we actually pay for, then actually, yeah, I'm not necessarily sure I agree that that's where the world is going to. I think from our perspective, and certainly I think this is where it is, if you have great quality journalism, it's just a fair price. And people are paying it and have paid it for many, many years. You just need to expand that base. And if there's an easy payment mechanic to be able to do that,
that's true, but look at it this way, that's true, but in the secondary market in information, if you like, it's always been free. So I can go to the library, I can get the copy out, I can go to the internet, I can get the article out. You know, so the secondary market in information, if you like, has always been largely free. So because it's paid for first up by this cover price and advertising, whatever, the rest of it is free. So in the conversation that goes on afterwards, yes, right? So if I'm an academic or I'm a researcher, I go and do, you know, I'm going to do a story about this, that, or the other. I do an internet search, or I get some press cuttings in the old days. You know, the old BBC, you get reams of photocopies of articles that someone's, you know, collected up and whatever. All probably in breach of copyright, blah blah blah. You know, but again, hardly what you call aberrant. But it's it's that process of assimilating, you know, from a wider range of sources is something that is really catching on. I mean, Alan Rusbridge, you know, calls it, talks in glowing terms about new journalism, and that's sort of what he means. Now, the world is changing. It's not aberrant behaviour. It's no, just I just don't see how.
There's aspects of
flogging a dead horse.
No. But there's aspects of where the world has changed. There's aspects of where the world hasn't changed, and particularly in relation to newspapers. And the aspect of where the world hasn't actually changed is that the news agenda in this country is still set by the newspaper predominantly, not by television media. It's different.
Except in the election we've just sat through, where precisely the opposite happened.
Well, I mean, we can have that discussion, but let's be. I mean, Clegg did not get more seats than he got before. So the variance in that...
The public might be sensible. That's a fact. That always needs to be borne in mind. People can work these things out. You know, after the third time he appeared saying, "Oh, it's all your fault," you know, you two guys. You know, oh, Christ, come on, tell us something.
But it's interesting thing because I mean, taking that point, this whole concept of having influence and having a voice actually wasn't driven in this election here. Maybe for Obama different, but in this election for here was not driven fundamentally by the mass of information news that was coming out of the internet. In many ways, I think it was actually driven fundamentally by television with the debates, but also from newspapers.
Well, I'm sure we'll come to this when we'll open it up in just a second, by all means. But because it strikes me that that's almost here's another radical idea. If you gave up on printing newspapers, you might be able to survive on your existing revenue and run a pretty creditable service. The Guardian reckon that their online revenues are about 40 million. Alan Rusbridger says to the media show yesterday. And could you, I mean, so ask one question. Can online revenues keep the traditional print business going? Answer, no. Ask another question. Could you run a journalistic operation with the right values, with the right quality of journalism, with enough global reach to make it a proper player, etc., 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 if you, on 40 million a year? Yeah.
Well, it depends how many journalists you have.
Okay, sure,
Yeah,
but...
yeah. A global operation is a little bit more expensive. But
So,
yeah.
so you're a forward thinker.
Yeah.
Is that where
That's
where this is
definitely-
going?
Yeah, absolutely.
You think at the end of print?
Well, I don't think it's the end of print, but I think it's the beginning of the digital has to pay for that free and independent newsroom. They have to pay for those journalists. I think it is that, personally.
But also, isn't it just the expansion of distribution? So whatever the form of distribution is, whether it's print and it's the trucks, or whether it's the devices, or whether it's the internet access, isn't it just an expansion? And for us, as a newspaper, it's about the journalistic element, not necessarily the ink on your fingers and stuff. So
Well, except that the newspaper, the printing presses, the distribution systems are enormously, they're
Very
labour
expensive.
intensive, they're hugely expensive.
Bad for the environment.
And it's kind of, there's all sorts of reasons why you wouldn't start from here, would you? Maybe. Don't know.
Gurtej, I'd pay maybe $11.97 a year for access. I mean, I've got my iPad here for access on an iPad. Or something. I think I'd pay if you made it really easy for me when you get me at the right time. If it's PayPal or if it's just so easy for me to subscribe, or if you can use some of the other payment mechanisms out there, particularly the mobile, I would pay.
Well, let's come to devices in just a second, because then we'll open it up. But just Douglas, do you think, are we drifting towards or hurtling towards the end of print?
Yeah, I think we're a bit away from. I mean, we're still selling 10 million papers a day. I mean, we're still a long way from print just disappearing. But of course, the interesting thing is who is buying print. The population is getting older and living longer. You know, this is the point. So therefore, that is the reason in the end why print will actually last quite a long time yet. And there is a huge gap between.
You mean because we're all used to it and we're not?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's an interesting kind of generation stuck in the middle. The people that buy CDs and download iTunes, the people that buy newspapers and use newspapers online. What we forget is that most people are in one camp or the other. And it's really interesting, you know, when you take
and you can see that when you look at this in a structured and detailed way, you can see that clearly.
Yeah, I mean, when one big national newspaper doing analysis of its online audience and its readers, you know, two very, very big numbers indeed, 4% crossover.
And is it just an age thing?
Largely it's age, yes.
Not class? Not gender?
I mean, it's
Geography?
It's partly wealth. It's partly wealth, but it's chiefly age.
So young people don't buy newspapers,
Correct.
the hard copy, but use
And of
online
course,
information.
and of course, the historic argument, indeed the historic trend, has been that as people get older, you know, when they settle, you know, once they're out of university or whatever, and they settle, they have family, they buy a property, etc. Suddenly they started getting into the habit of buying a newspaper. You know, that was always the theory, and indeed it turned out it was pretty much the practice for several decades. That I think is what's broken. That sort of journey, I think, is history.
Okay, devices, and then we'll open it up to others in the room. There's 2 iPads here, I noticed. Do you think, do device, from where you sit, do any of the devices that we can currently see or are about to get, are any of them potential game changers, do you think?
Well, I mean, the iPad is the kind of obvious one to ask that question of, and it is such a beautiful object, and reading on it is obviously a completely pleasurable experience. The problem with it is, from a supplier's perspective, i.e. a publisher's perspective, is that the iPad is so pleasant to read on that actually reading anything on the iPad becomes a kind of pleasant experience. So you kind of assumed, I think, when you first picked up the iPad, that, or I mean, I assumed when I first picked up the iPad, this is great news for newspaper publishers. This is good news. If I'm a magazine publisher, if I'm a newspaper publisher, this feels like good news. And then I realized actually reading blogs on this thing is fantastic. Now that bit hadn't occurred to me.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
because actually it's just such a nice experience. So I think the kind of whole kind of opening up, you know, the thing about apps, of course, is that they're so powerful. They bring the brand back into the equation because you kind of naturally have your home, particularly on an iPhone, you have your kind of natural kind of homepage or series of 3 or 4 homepages where you start using the same brands again and again, whether it's a retailer and a news service and this and that and the next thing. But I think with the iPad, that kind of whole ecosystem starts to feel like it's opening up a bit. It's just such a pleasure to use that actually the supply side is not as simple as it first looks.
Well, and while we're on the sort of new media, you'll be pleased to know that your comment that journalism has always been an industry with curious metrics is whizzing around the Twitter sphere as we speak. What do you think, Ewan? Are any of these devices game changer?
I think the iPad is game changing because people are making it game changing. Okay, the real issue I think is remembering that there is life beyond something, iPhone, iPad. I really like the Financial Times viewpoint of you're buying our content, have it wherever you want it. And they mean that, right? You mean wherever you want it. Yeah. On a BlackBerry, on a so-and-so, or whatever. 1.2 billion mobile devices sold last year. How many newspapers have their content purposed for those devices? Just phones, right? Not looking at pads at the minute. That's a real issue, a real problem. The iPad, the Android, various different pads, the other different pads coming out, it's going to be really interesting to see how old media gets this.
Do you think that, I mean, it's a conventional, well, you know, it's a conventional wisdom, I suppose, that people are prepared to pay for things on mobile phones. They're down to ringtones, you name it. People on mobile phones, people don't hesitate to pay. When they're sitting at their desktop, they will run a mile per minute. They don't pay unless they're shopping, as it were. So you know, on sort of tippy-tappy online is free, whereas mobile online, is the iPad close enough to mobile, do you think, to make it effective? Is it going to carry with it the mobile habit, or is it going to carry with it the tippy-tappy desktop habit?
I downloaded the Time magazine application, which is really, that was $4.99 it cost me, which I think is the same price of the magazine. And I thought, this is amazing, it's really nice, and Steve Jobs is there, and they've done a reasonably nice job of making their content for the iPad. And then the next week's one came out, and I thought, $4.99, that's just quite expensive.
But would you buy that in print?
No, see, that's the interesting thing. So
Either way.
Well, very, very cool point, in that I don't buy Time magazine every week, all right? I buy it when I'm at the airport, for example. So I think
so often you'd buy the $4.99.
Yeah. But if you were expecting it every week, I think you.
Zenio.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
So to your point, the issue is that very few people pay full price reliably, which is why magazines want you to subscribe for $12.99 for a year. So Zenio, that's what they're attempting to do here, is they are an environment inside the iPad where you can subscribe on a yearly basis to a variety of magazines, and they look fantastic.
So it's like a sort of, it's like an online magazine store.
It is. It's an on iPad magazine store.
And I really like the model.
What do you hope will happen with the iPad?
The one thing we certainly know is that there's an economy around apps. The one thing we also know is virtually, whether it's Apple, even to some extent if it's Google and stuff, they're all having the discussions effectively with all of us as publishers in relation to building up a mechanic to allow payment to occur. Part of the challenge with the internet piece, I think, is fundamentally it was never that easy to pay. And actually it's very, very easy to pay with the app piece to this. And whether it's the slightly, voyeuristic element, whether it's the element of just sort of investigating all various bits, it actually does make a difference. And I do think it's a lot easier to do, and I think it will only just get easier as well.
And do you think that, what is your long-term view of things like the iPad?
We will certainly be positioned, and we'll be positioned strongly, and if somebody buys the iPad version and doesn't buy the newspaper physical edition, it doesn't matter to us that much. That's fine by us. We will build for every single device. We see it as a distribution platform. We see an absolute distribution platform, and a mechanic to be able to take a fair price for our journalism as well. So we were positioned.
And at the FT, well, not so much at the FT. Obviously, you can't talk about the FT.
I'm really being hammered on this.
But given the sort of business you're in,
Yes.
do you think is the iPad is that sort of device a game changer for you? Do you think?
I think it is a fantastic new opportunity for us. I think it's the first time that there's been a lovely browsing experience with the digital side of our business. Websites, mobile sites traditionally are always, you're just looking for what you need. It's always time critical. And no matter how well you build a website, I've rarely seen a website where I just want to spend time and browse without doing something. Whereas this is such a lovely experience that I think it's a fantastic browsing experience, and it allows for that serendipity that you rarely find properly on sites. And so for us, I think it is a great opportunity.
I think one of the important parts also about the iPad and that whole app economy is that you deliver something. It's not, so much of your experience in terms of the internet site or the website is there's a whole physical act that associates with yourself with being in front of a laptop, in front of a machine, X, Y, Z. With the iPad and devices of that type, actually, you know what, I will deliver a newspaper at 4 o'clock in the morning. It will be the 3rd edition. When you get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, it will be delivered, it will be available, it will be accessible. You will be able to go onto the bus with it because it will be downloaded. You will be able to read it on the tube. So I actually think that this whole concept of pushing versus actually having to pull is much more natural inflation associated with newspapers, for us at least, than it is in relation to websites. I think it's quite strange. I think the iPad.
Do you think people will take the mobile phone habit? In other words, will they take a pay habit to the iPad, or is it a bit too big, or what?
I mean, Apple have got decent revenues coming out. Amazon have decent revenues coming out from their whole Kindle sort of devices. Well, the devices,
At the right price.
Mature as well.
The right price.
It's the right price. It's the right product. It's the right quality. It's the right delivery, and all of those bits as well.
Okay, over to you, chap there. Anything you like. Wait for the microphone, and just tell us who you are if you don't mind.
James Anslow from City University, London. Just to rewind to this golden age of wonderful Times journalism that has somehow made driven offline revenue. I mean, that just isn't true, isn't it? Isn't that just a rather arrogant self-deception that somehow that the Times journalism makes money now offline? It doesn't. I mean, it's a vanity publication for a megalomaniac. I mean,
welcome to the press.
It's bundled into News International for that purpose. I think we've got a false premise here that somehow there is a current situation where wonderful Times journalism drives revenue, and we must continue it driving revenue. But it doesn't drive revenue. That's a self-deception.
Well, the gap between the cost and the revenue piece is a lot more substantial than it used to be. So managing within that environment is actually, I mean, it's sustainability. Can we sustain the desk in Afghanistan? Can we sustain the desk in various bits and pieces? Should we be reporting on this? Sorry.
That's good. Well, let's get some people and then we'll...
That was interesting. I actually don't want to go away from that topic, but the thing that I had to say was actually slightly different. There's a usability expert. His name is Jacob Nielsen. Hopefully you've all heard of him. I use his work in my teaching at City University because he has a very interesting distinction. I'm teaching online journalism, by the way. He has a very interesting distinction between lean-back media and lean-forward media. And the idea is that web users are solution hunters. They're leaning forward. They're much more fickle. And I feel like that's a distinction that we need to make. So much of the time it seems like we're actually trying to expect to treat web users as if they are lean-back users and they're happy to just sort of sit there and buy web pages as they would buy paper. And much of what I'm hearing about the sort of justification for paywalls and actually the damage that they do to the sort of online conversation, the ability for me to link someone else to a story that I found interesting or whatever, because I've paid and they've decided it's actually not worth it, or there's something ethically wrong with it even. None of that seems to recognize that there is this difference between a lean back and a lean forward. And actually, if we try and treat web users as, I mean, the thing that's useful and interesting about the iPad actually is that it makes it back into the kind of product that you might crawl into bed with on a Sunday morning or whatever. I just wanted to make that clear because it's a really key distinction, I think.
Up there, and then someone over there at the back there. There, and then there.
Okay, Tim Spark. I run Joining the Docs TV, which is a pay documentary site. My only little bit of advice to the newspapers would be, why don't you follow the Premier League or even the government last week and all collaborate and make yourselves all behind a paywall? Because I'll pay £100 a year if I can get all 4 quality newspapers. Well, no, but I will pay £100 for that if that's my only choice. And just as newspapers weren't free pre-internet, the browsing experience is, you know, we go to the Times, we go to the Guardian, we then read something, you know, in the Telegraph. To survive, you've got to collaborate. You've got to understand your audience.
The problem, isn't it? That newspapers were not free before the internet. That's true, but the conversation, the secondary conversation, was uninhibited. You didn't have to pay to participate because enough people had bought the paper to make a megalomaniac or someone think it was worth doing. So you know, the secondary conversation. The problem here is, isn't it, that the place that the conversation is now going on online. If you make people pay in that arena, then you are restricting access to that conversation. It will be different. I mean, maybe if we all sign up to it.
There's no difference to restricting access to the Premier League or restricting access to the BBC through the licence fee or restricting access. There is nothing wrong with restricting access and making people want to pay for stuff. And this idea that the internet should be free because it's ethical is, you know, it comes from people who don't actually belong in the digital economy, because that isn't an economy, it's a bankruptcy.
Okay. Chap at the back there. There's the chap there first, and then over there. The conversation. Hold on, Tim. The conversation's over there now. We'll come back, Tim. We'll come back to it. One at a time. Otherwise, we can't.
Matteo Berlucchi, I'm the founder of a company called Live Station, and we stream live news on various devices. I think that what surprises me every time I go to this type of talks, which, as you can imagine, is not the only one in town about news and how to pay for it, is that I haven't heard the keyword spoken on that panel, which is service. Everybody keeps on thinking that this is a content, you know, people should pay for content. Is content here, content there? People don't pay for content the moment that the content becomes commoditized. What people are showing a good propensity to part with the credit card numbers with is for good services. Things like lovefilm.com or Spotify, or, you know, we can go on endlessly with fantastic companies that are leveraging the internet to deliver an experience. So I think that what I find amazing about the Times is that they're not thinking at all in those terms. And instead of talking about paywall, they should say, well, we're not doing a paywall, we're launching some premium services around our great content. And some of it may be free, some of it may be paid for because it's delivering a different experience, which is optimized for iPads or is you know, you could, imagine if you could, I would pay to be able to download the Times on my mobile so that I could read it on the underground. Yeah, but you're not going to do that. You're going to charge me just to get on the web. So I just think that it's completely off topic. The whole thing should be just on service rather than content.
I think as we sort of launch our products, which will come out in the next few weeks on the devices and in terms of the website as well, I think your question will be completely answered. And I think it'll be answered for the positive, very positively.
Okay, chap there. Do tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Robert Andrews from Paid Content. And a question for Gurtej. Did you ask readers about this proposal, and what did they tell you? Did you do any research? Because we conducted research and only 5% of people said they would pay for a news site. And also, what does this do to your search engine optimization strategy? Does it make it less important? For example, you stop Google from crawling, or does it make it more important in a way?
taking your first question, we did endless research. I think the one thing we've got to be slightly careful about, although we're a general newspaper, there's absolutely no reason why actually we can't be stronger in various verticals as well, in where there are positions in influence.
Sorry, what's a vertical?
So I mean, politics would be one, sport would be one,
sorry,
all those things.
Subject areas.
Subject areas. I'm sorry, I'm talking internet terms now. So from our perspective, we're not talking about the Times. We're talking about the Times plus more. We're talking, on whichever device delivered in various places. So I think it's important, certainly in this sort of conversation, not to sort of look at a black and white piece. There are many shades of greys, and we intend to live in many shades of grey as well, because actually that is the element about service. That is the element about a deeper experience for the city or for people who are fundamentally interested in politics and various bits and pieces. It's about sort of, the Guardian example has 38 million unique users. There's a split between where they are in terms of locations and various bits. It's enormously difficult to put your hands around that community, because what you're actually doing is it's forcing you to be a general news position as well. At a much smaller number, it's a lot more easier to have that one-to-one type relationship as well. And it's a community you can put your hands around, and you can look at various functions within that as well. So sort of, taking the sort of point first, did we do research? Yes. Do we know where we need to target? Yes. Do we think we know where we need to expand within that? Absolutely.
What did the research tell you?
The research, I mean, obviously, there are...
How many said they'd pay?
I would rather not. I mean, it's commercially confidential information, really. But we wouldn't be doing what we're doing if we didn't believe there was a game in town. So if we take the element of research, yes, we did it. We did a lot of research. Is it something that we think that will generate enough revenues and actually build for the future and a strategy in the next few years? Absolutely.
There's a chap here.
Hi, I'm James from Made by Many. It occurs to me that the reason that the Premier League is a fundamentally different model than news is that the Premier League happens in a series of physical spaces that are controlled, and only certain people can bring cameras into them. The reason that general news is different from that is that anybody can report on general news. So and there are a number of competitors. Sky has an exclusive contract to cover the Premier League. As soon as you have one free competitor to that, then the number of subscribers will, especially if they're covering exactly the same stuff. So all we're left with is opinion, which is the only differential between the different papers. My question is that enough? Is the opinion enough to get somebody to subscribe? Why would I pay the Times for facts which are available to me free elsewhere? That's the fundamental
Douglas,
question.
what do you think?
Well, I think there's very little evidence of it so far. And if you look at, there are a number of paywalls in the US. There are 10, 15, 20 local news services with paywalls, and they're getting sort of 2% of the readership kind of circulation, kind of paying for it. And I think one of the challenges is that newspapers are a sort of perfect bundle for a pre-internet age. I think that's one of the kind of curious things about all this, is that newspapers do a number of different things. They report on news, they report on they have features, they have arts coverage, they have sport, we could go on and on and on. But all of that kind of combined into one place might feel slightly irrelevant for a 16-year-old today, I think, because actually they go to a variety of different places to find that kind of content. And I think that's one of the kind of fundamental challenges. But
what about the idea that only if you like, only opinion, in the general run of things, that general news is not a differentiator? In other words, if you put yourself behind a paywall on what most of what you're offering is general news, no one's going to buy it.
I think it comes back to the debate that we've already had. I mean, there may be literally a handful of writers that can get to that kind of level, but the reality is the vast majority of commentators would not be able to kind of charge for that content. So,
what's your instinct then? Do you think that the Times is the News International's foray into pay? Is it going to work, or are they going to find themselves tail between legs?
I think it's dependent on a number of things, and I think it's the point about the Premier League. The point about the Premier League is that only one set of cameras turns up, so people pay for it. if lots of different newspapers go behind the paywall, then my answer would be slightly different from the answer I would give if the Times is left alone.
What about the BBC? Wouldn't that have to as well?
Well,
yeah.
wouldn't it have to what? Would the BBC have to go behind a paywall?
I mean, if we're talking about the news coverage and we've got the BBC free in inverted commas, isn't this yet another false argument? This is a false premise.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't work for Sky.
One chap here, then these two chaps here, then over there.
So most of the people in the room, I'm probably the only person that really should have subscribed to the Mobile Industry Review, and I didn't.
I was depending on you, man.
I know. And that's probably because the majority of the time I can get my news from virtually everywhere else, and it's good enough. You're saying that the Times has to be better than just good enough to entice people into pay for the content. And did I may have missed it right at the beginning. Did you say that everything on the Times website is going behind a paywall, or just the stuff that you feel is worth paying for?
Everything's going behind. There are some elements that we will give away, but they are much more in terms of allowing sampling to occur, because we're much earlier in the curve. You're absolutely right, it has to be better. I mean, you know, in the end, it still comes back to the point that if the element about people paying is down to the quality of what you can produce in terms of content, that's a game that, you know, as journalists and in terms of the media industry, we've always been in. That's fine. You know, that gives us some level of control of actually getting getting journalism supported. But if the game is effectively, no matter what you do, no matter what quality you put in, all you end up doing is going to a mass commoditized search engine that effectively allows that access for free, then it's a game that's, you know, our quality...
But it's not for free. You make money out of the advertising.
But, I mean, what's absolutely clear, and yeah, let's be completely honest, no matter what happens in terms of the advertising in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, the sustainability of an editorial budget, and John knows this better than I do, of £100 million is not insignificant. I mean, the concept associated with, well, it's the internet, it should be free and various other bits and pieces, no, it needs to be fair. Because actually it costs us. It costs a significant amount of money to put a desk in Afghanistan. And actually, you know, from a consumer perspective, if we can create a proposition that is that enticing, is that interesting, is that deeper, and is more than just the newspaper, because of the variety of technology differences, advancements you have, then we have a game.
Okay, let's just go quickly, then we'll...
I don't think you have got the ability to create content that, you know, why should I pay you for the content? I'd much rather just pay the 4 columnists in the Times that I want to read directly. Well, I can just cut you out, surely. Why would I want to go via you? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I can get all the rest of my commoditized news from all over the internet. Those 4 people, I'll happily pay them.
Okay, let's leave that. Hold that thought.
My name's John Henry Barrack. I'm an iPhone, iPad app designer. Designed the Guardian iPhone app, and I think it's. I mean, I'm very interested to see what happens with all these various paywalls. I think that the problem is they'll begin to damage the conversation that's begun to happen in the last 10 years on the internet. And I think that there's a way in which information is flowing around, which is, like you said, incredibly useful, important, and different and new. And I think that there's going to be quite a period of confusion arising out of the paywalls. But I think what apps offer is there is a payment model there, and you are offering kind of value-added products which give you kind of niche.
But it is that chap's point, isn't it? It's the apps as a service. It makes it available in ways that.
I think that's the other thing is that news organisations generate such a huge wide variety of stories. You talked about vertical, and you talked about sports. When you talked about sport, the Premier League, a blogger or someone writing about sport live during a match, etc., which you can use on, use your app to while you're watching the match live on television to get further information, etc., etc. If news organisations can generate service apps which combine news and services in much more niche products, then I think that's valuable.
So do you think then that theoretically that there might be somewhere down the track there might be an application-based commercial model?
I think that's part of it.
But which allowed free online access?
I don't see why not. I mean, there is the question of how do you pay for what isn't paid for by the apps. You know, the core of the thing, the stuff that it's more difficult to sell.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the right person to ask because I'm in his.
But I think there was one other thing I wanted to just briefly mention. I was at a conference a couple of a month ago, in which there's something else called Spot Us. I don't know if people know about where people, well, essentially readers pay to commission articles, and I think that's quite. And there's various other interesting models of making.
Do you know what I would think would be really nice to see?
Can you pass that along to the end, to the lady there on the end? We'll come back to this chap here in just a second.
On the iPad or on the mobile or something, I'd really like to see someone innovate with World Cup coverage. You know, World Cup's coming up. Can I download the iPad app, which has got Terry Venables, some guy from Manchester United, and somebody else really giving phenomenally good coverage? You could have done that 2 or 3 years ago, but it's me accessing it was a problem. Very easy on the iPad, and I can imagine a lot of people going, yeah, you know what, just a tenner or a tenner for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But you get that guy, and you can actually really innovate much better than Sky or BBC or anyone else could do. That would be really exciting to see.
Absolute radio.
Right. Yep.
Over there.
Hi, I'm Patricia. I'm a planning partner at CHI. My question was, people talked about how going behind a paywall makes newspapers fall out of the conversation. I saw some data recently that said people are prepared to pay for content, but they then expect to be able to share that content with whoever they want to. Are there any models that people are considering or experimenting with that enable both social sharing and paid-for content?
There's absolutely models. I mean, we have a starting point. I mean, the challenge is that there's a whole position we're taking, which is about reconfiguration. The reconfiguration isn't a choice of a megalomaniac kid, to quote various bits and terms. It's actually a position we find ourselves because of where this industry actually is. The maturity will happen. The conversations will happen. We will get to that position as our products evolve. We will learn in terms of where the verticals and the various bits and pieces are. Because, you know, let's be honest, I'm not talking about the Times here, but as a newspaper industry in this country, we are good at what we do. And we position well.
But the problem you've got is, in your world, social sharing is theft.
Yes, this is, I mean, for us, we
control social sharing is not theft.
We face this. We face.
Sorry, go on.
So we do face this issue all the time because we do prompt for registration now at a count of 0. So if the minute you want to see an article, we ask you to register for free. We've had debates internally, but have seen the sharing so abused by a few, not probably by most.
No, but
it is abused, and so it's one of those things that we need to monitor quite closely. So that's what we've done, is we put in a lot of monitoring. We follow up with those who are on the who are you know, using it incorrectly.
Technology solutions.
Can I just follow up on that quickly? I mean, read Larry Lessig or someone. I mean, the whole, you can't fight a crowd of nearly 2 billion internet users who want to do things a certain way. You have to adapt, not them. You can't have this control. That's the crazy part.
If a major hedge fund is using all of your data and spreading it to everybody in the business without and saying, oh no, we don't.
Okay, that's specialized.
Well, yes.
Actually, one of the things we haven't talked about enough today is the idea of target audience.
To a point I think you made a bit earlier in relation to free access. I mean, I think we have to stop being naive. I mean, you know, I appreciate the position from an academic level, but you know, there's enough people in this room and there's enough of us here who actually do care about the journalist, who do care about getting the story out, and this whole sense of the fact that this story, this whole concept that, you know, the conversations don't happen. You know, the conversations won't happen when we don't have proper journalism, when we don't have that sort of access. That's actually when that conversation will start to die in various places. It's not free, it costs money.
There's 3 fallacies we've heard tonight, and I think the first one is that...
Who are you, sorry?
William Owen, sorry. The first one is that free is the freedom of the internet has anything to do with a moral right. It's because it's to do with the fact that the means of production and distribution are almost free, and that's why we don't pay for it. And the reason we used to pay for newspapers is they had a monopoly of the microphone, and right now they don't. And I think the second fallacy is that newspapers are in competition with other newspapers. They're not. So if all the newspapers went behind a paywall, we could still get all the news for free. And it would make absolutely no difference whatsoever. And I think the third fallacy is that nothing else changes. It's just about how you pay. And you made an interesting comment about the secondary conversation and that always used to be free, which it was, but it was also dramatically limited because it was just what you could do in the pub. Yeah. And now if somebody tweets about something that's been said in this room tonight, that could, within half an hour, go to 200,000 people.
I bet Megalomaniac has. In fact, it has.
Yeah, so the question is, how does that change journalism? I mean, the Times seems to think, and a lot of the newspapers seem to think that journalism now is just the same, and it just means writing a story, and no matter how that's a brilliant story, and then it stops.
Okay, but here's the question then. Yeah. So if journalism, in the broader sense, it remains valuable, if it's an important part of that conversation, not just because it puts into the public domain, reliable facts, information, things that you could, as well as finely honed comment, analysis, and so on. If that's an important part of the conversation, ultimately, what's the business model?
Well, the business model is not necessarily advertising or subscription. And Becca made the point about the service had the answer, insofar as newspapers are no longer products, they're now potentially services, and they have a completely different relationship with their customers. It's not an indirect relationship where you chuck it at them and then you never see them, and it's mediated by the newsagent and the truck.
So you're not saying there isn't a business model? There is, but it's not charging for content in a straightforward sense.
There's business models, but they're not necessarily anything that we'd recognise from a newspaper. And I think that the whole attitude that journalists have towards their readers has to change. And I think, one interesting example is what the FT is doing, not with their subscription model, but with what they're doing with Alphaville. With Alphaville, which is a service where journalists work all day talking to their talking to the readers all day long, and there's 4 or 5 interesting different experiments that they're doing to see how that work. And they're hosting a conversation. They're giving all their sources away for nothing. They're publishing their filing cabinets. One day they'll be publishing their content books. And I think so that there's a fundamental difference with the practice. And I won't go into a whole load of other business models around selling things, for example. But I think fundamentally it's not about paywalls, and I will leave tonight more and more convinced that sometime in the next 6 months the Times will blink.
Can I just say one thing about Alphaville is a great part of the site, and it's fantastic. But you said first that something about how it doesn't cost much to do this. No, I didn't say that. Well, something. What was your first quote? It was something about.
Well, no, I said it doesn't cost. The means of distribution and production are almost free.
Right. Well, almost is not almost. It's expensive, and Alphaville is an example of.
I'm not talking about producing I'm not talking about paying journalists. I'm talking about if I want to publish something, all I need is my iPhone.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes, that's true.
So once upon a time, it was control of the microphone. It was control.
Yeah.
Okay, chap there. Been waiting patiently.
Hi, I'm Julio Romo. I'm a communications and social media consultant, very much focusing on the media industry. I wanted to pick up a point, and certainly a point that Steve made very early on about conversation. And kind of one of the things that's been going through my mind for some time, especially after hearing everybody's comments, really, is really wondering if the culture that exists, and certainly the offering that you're talking about with regards to what you provide, either from in front of the paywall or from certainly behind the paywall, is still very much a culture which is monologue. This is you delivering rather than engaging, rather than having a conversation. So let it be from in front. It's still very much content. And the reason why I say this is because, of course, there's been some very good research done by the Reuters Institute of Journalism. And, of course, one of the examples being the BBC of how they're moving away. And certainly they have moved away from being the first for breaking news to being the first for verified news. Now, bearing this in mind, shouldn't we be thinking about moving towards engaging with the audience? Let's say that you do have a paywall. What's your offering going to be? The model that's been discussed just now about very much how the FT is working and into dialogues and sharing content and getting feeds, etc., is one that appears to be very receptive to people within the FT community. But what about all the other outlets out there? Shouldn't there be a model and a debate going on rather than, right, here's the content, there you have it. The only dialogue you're going to have is basically on the message boards below, very much like the BBC has had with the Treisman affair, commenting on what's been happening by the decision by the mail. Something's still very much in the culture of the industry not quite right.
But isn't the fundamental challenge here? It's not about whether the content is worth having and is worth paying for, and so much as what's being described as the conversation is a real thing. It's a kind of quite a liberating thing. It's something that people are doing because they want to. It's beginning to impact democracy, public affairs, public life is being impacted by this conversation. And what I'm still struggling with is how the Times, great institution, or megalomaniac's mouthpiece, whichever, possibly both, I don't understand how it's going to function, absenting itself from that process.
Well, I mean, there's 2 points. I think the point you were making in relation to the interactivity in the various bits and the engagement process, actually, we do some of that, and we are going to extend that. There is the concept about Cover It Live. We had Ed Balls come in. We did live debates of various bits and pieces as well. So actually, there's an evolution of technology that allows that to occur as we go forward as well. Will they be behind the I mean, at the moment, they're not. Going forward, yes, they will be.
Who else would like to contribute?
Sorry, Steve, just on to your
Sorry,
point.
no, just trying to get the microphone. Who else would like to contribute? Chat there and chat back again. We'll be right there. Sorry, go ahead.
And the second point in terms of, we're all in an experimental phase, but is there a concept associated, say, with the Times or the Sunday Times, which says that we should be in a position where we are, where the debate is, or the discussion is? The answer is yes. And how we do that, what the mechanics around that are, we're going to learn. We will be there. There's no, that's the position we have to take, much for the same reasons that you've spoken about. But it's an evolution process.
Okay. Chat there.
My name is Mark Hollingsworth. I'm part of the dying breed of print journalists and published authors. I just wanted to address the issue of access to news and whether people will actually read about, in terms of the different aspects of news and factual news, because I would have thought that if there's a story that's published in the Times website that doesn't appear on The Guardian or doesn't appear in the FT, i.e. a new story, a new investigative story, then people obviously are more likely to then to subscribe to the Times rather than other websites. And I don't agree with this issue that people are only going to be buying for comment, because if the number of journalists is still there and the quality of the journalists is still there, you're going to find, just as in print days, stories on certain websites that you will not. So people are going to be informed in different ways, and I just wondered if you could address that.
No, I completely agree. I mean, if the issue is associated with, is it quality journalism? Will we get the stories out, and will people pay for the content? Yes. Do they also need, do we also need to offer services? Yes. Do we also need to offer interactivity? Absolutely. But and it's not one of ours, but the Daily Telegraph, they've recently won the award in relation to the MP's expenses piece, the largest news story that was going. Do we believe at a certain point in time when they broke that story that there would be a number of people who would be willing to pay for access to that? Yes, it's a great story. And
I might have read the Times coverage off the Telegraph.
Yeah, I mean, no, absolutely, but yeah. Well, no, it would be better, but but the point I'm making is
I know what you mean.
The point is it's access to information.
Because
they had sources.
But
they had absolutely the sources.
Challenge is, if I want to know about it right now, I'm just going to go to Google, and whoever's got it free is going to get my eyeball.
Yeah, but would you buy the?
And even if it's not
do you buy the Times newspaper?
Sometimes, yes. I'm just saying that the issue is it not that you've got the content, if you've got it,
yes,
or if the Telegraph's got it, and then a smart journalist comes along and says, this is what the Telegraph says is, and they're reporting the following, we think the following, and we inform this, and you can go and link to it, but you've got to pay for that. And here's what the Guardian's saying about this. I think
there's no questions you're right. I mean, let's be honest, but the issue comes back down to who else is going to be in the game or not. And actually, what we're doing is we are absolutely the first. The New York Times is going to go in January. The Wall Street Journal is already there. The FT is already there. So actually, the real question is, how much is it sustainable not to be in the same position that we are in terms of generating revenue?
Chat there.
Jerry Hanley from Red Bee Media. In listening to this, I don't hear a lot of talk about customers, and I really, you mentioned the word vertical. for me, I really want to look and drill down to who are we actually trying to reach? Because really, I look at you up here and think, you're all tribal leaders, right? Each one of these papers is different and has a different perspective. And you know, if you look at Wall Street Journal does not charge for opinion. Wall Street Journal charges for facts that are verified and for analysis, right? And so if I trust the Wall Street Journal, I might subscribe to that because I get high quality information and I get high quality analysis. And the opinion comes for free. And you as a service provider can build communities around that. And I'm just not hearing, I mean, there was a question here about communities, and I'm just not hearing that you guys are really looking at who is consuming your content and why. Because you can drive much higher CPMs on advertising if you know who you're talking to.
We spend an enormous amount of time doing that, and that's why we do drive higher CPMs than anybody else that I know of in the industry. Yeah, we do a lot of behavioral targeting, a lot of, we know our customers very well. What do you want me to talk about?
I doubt it.
Well, what we've done is we look at them both from an advertising and from a customer point of view. So we get into detail on things like what kind of content they look at most often, what their age group is, what their industry is, and then we segment according to that. And then we'll look at what they're doing on our other FT group sites as well. We'll follow them there. And then the other thing that we've done is we're quite sophisticated, I think, on our subscription models, because we do a lot of optimization. So we're constantly price testing, and we're constantly looking at how to what am I trying to say? How to trigger somebody to move from just being a registered to a subscriber with these great upsell models and things. So we've. So you are
doing it, and I'm sure that you'll be doing it too.
A huge amount of time and money on it.
Because we're coming to the end here. And
yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes, I thought it would be.
Yeah. If that answers it.
Been waiting very patiently.
My name's Chris King, and I'm involved in the industry as much as I buy newspapers sometimes. The thing that the internet's changed for me in the way that I consume news, especially if it's about stuff like the election, is something that the last questioner touched on slightly, which is that different newspapers have different perspectives on things. So I will go to the Times, the Independent, the Guardian, Al Jazeera, and the BBC if I really want to get a kind of better idea of what's going on, and having to pay £1 or £2 to go to the Times website to see what their editorial says about something is not something I'm going to do, because I'm not tribal in the sense of I buy a particular newspaper. Yeah, I don't see how.
I mean, being completely respectful to yourself and actually the audience and various bits and pieces, we're in a position, going back to this, we're in a position where there's absolutely no choice in relation to how we're going to fund this. So I accept what you're saying, there's no issues about that. But will you be our target audience, would you as an individual, for your behaviour in the manner that it is in relation to buying or not? Actually, there's a whole load of people that do actually.
Don't you think, isn't it in some sort of hypothetical near future, when you've got an iPad or whatever Google flatbed or whatever it's going to be called, and you get up in the morning and already downloaded is for maybe 20 pence a throw or 5 pence a throw or some relatively manageable amount. You've got 3 or 4 newspapers every day, and you can choose whether you want to look at them or not. They're there. It's probably costing you £1 and maybe £2.50.
I'd cheerfully do that.
And you get on the train on the way to work, or the bus, or whatever, or your coffee break. You be thinking, oh, that's interesting. Is there a hypothetical future where you could end up doing that?
Yes, absolutely. And I would cheerfully have what would annoy me is if I have to go to 5 different places and register.
5 different sign-in sites.
5 different.
That's why I think that makes me think the chap at the back is probably right.
As the gentleman over there said about, I could get access to all of these, and even through micropayments, follow a chain of articles about a particular thing I'm interested in, and maybe jump onto something else. Especially if it was seamless, and I got a receipt every week. I would very happily.
I certainly have been involved in countless conversations with various people who want to do this. But the problem is privacy. Yeah, the problem is privacy rules and things. That's where
Because we are coming to the end. A quick round. Anyone else who wants to say? Then, who are you?
Yes, Mark Chadwell. I'm another of the consultants. And obviously, I'm not blogging because I hope somebody will pay me.
I saw you earlier applauding the comment about CPM. Thought I've entered a parallel universe.
Was I?
That's right.
Yes, no. So I'm interested in tapping your brains on two things. The ditch the print movement, which somebody raised earlier. What's your take on the Christian Science Monitor, vanity publication, budget of 25 million a year, which has done exactly that? And what's your take on...
It's done what, sorry?
Stopped printing,
okay.
done only online distribution,
okay. Right.
Does a download version every day that you can pay for. Okay. And the Global Post, which is doing a slightly different model, never has printed.
Okay. Chap up there.
Hello, I'm Adam Timworth. I work in editorial development for Read Business Information. I just want to challenge a couple of statements made earlier. First of all, that we're in an experimental phase on paywalls. We've been doing them for 15 years. And we're making more money off online than we are in print. But our experience is you can't put journalism behind it because there's too much out there. You put data services and you use the journalism to draw it in. Yeah. What makes you think, I mean, our experience is that people won't pay for commodity content. They will pay for unique data services.
We are the first newspaper of general news that's going behind, so the experimental element is that. I absolutely accept that there is data sets and data sources, special reports and various bits and pieces as you increase, as you go. So the experimental element I talked about was just the fact that a general newspaper is going behind a paywall, more than specifically your issue there.
Go at the back. The guru, as you will.
Yeah, a couple of comments. Two extremes. One is The Economist, whose sales are growing, skyrocketing, both on print and online, because they focus on quality. Because people are obviously keen on paying for quality, which is why you pay for football, because you want to watch the Premier League and, and you're willing to pay for it. And a lot of people want to read The Economist and they're happy to pay. Another extreme, like if I were a News Corp, instead of worrying about a paywall, I would make sure that all my newspaper were available on the Kindle, which I just use on holiday when I go stuck with the volcano off in Spain, and I was getting my FT delivered to me for $20 a month, which is outrageous, but I was happy to pay because it was seamlessly delivered over 3G without having to worry about getting on the Wi-Fi of the hotel and paying 10 quid a day. So, but funnily enough, on the newspapers, no, you're not. There's only the FT and the Independent.
No,
sorry.
No.
You're not now. Maybe you're going to go on it.
No. The Times is on the Kindle.
Sorry,
you can check.
Well, okay, not the one that I bought from Amazon in the US, but so, and then it's an example of a service because you're paying for a seamless delivery of the paper over the air.
Okay. Well, listen, I think we've had a most stimulating debate. I'd like to thank the panel, and in particular, I think Gurtej.
Yes, he really
has got